Imagine waking up one morning to find that everything you thought was safe, your job, your savings, your future, had vanished overnight. That's what life was like for millions when the Great Depression hit. The year was 1929. The Roaring Twenties had ended with a crash so loud it echoed through every home, every farm, and every heart in America. In cities, once busy streets fell silent. Banks closed their doors, locking away people's life savings forever. Crowds gathered outside in disbelief, staring at the brick walls that now guarded their lost futures. Some men never came home that night, too ashamed to face their families, too broken to start over. The stock market crash wasn't just an economic event. It was the day hope died for an entire generation. And yet, the pain had just begun. Jobs disappeared almost instantly. Factories shut down, farmers went bankrupt. Even the most ordinary items, bread, soap, gasoline, became luxuries. In small towns, you could find families walking along railroad tracks, carrying all they owned in old suitcases. Children didn't go to school, not because they didn't want to, but because they had no shoes. Families huddled around cold stoves in the middle of winter, burning whatever they could find just to stay warm. A decent meal became a dream. People lined up for hours in what were called bread lines, waiting for a bowl of soup or a single piece of bread from local charities. And the hardest part? No one knew when it would end. Each day felt like a fight for survival. Men roamed the streets looking for work. Women mended old clothes until they fell apart. And children grew up far too fast, learning to live without toys, without comfort, without certainty. The Great Depression turned people into survivors, but it also changed what it meant to be human. People began trading instead of buying. A few eggs for a loaf of bread, a coat for a sack of potatoes. In some towns, they even created their own form of money, the scrips, or IOUs, because real cash was nowhere to be found. Farmers fared no better. The Dust Bowl ravaged the land, stripping away fertile soil and hope alike. Families fled the plains, loading everything onto battered trucks and heading west to California, chasing rumors of work that often didn't exist. Thousands lived in makeshift camps by the roadside, building tents out of rags and cardboard. Some called them Hoovervilles, mocking the president they blamed for their misery. Through it all, there was this haunting silence, the kind that comes when an entire nation holds its breath, praying for something to change. People still dressed neatly, still said, "Good morning." But behind every forced smile was fear. Would there be food tomorrow? Would they lose their home next? It's easy to look back and see statistics, but behind those numbers were real lives. A mother choosing which child eats tonight. A father pretending he's not hungry so his family doesn't worry. A child who stopped believing that birthdays meant cake. This was life during the Great Depression. Not a chapter in a textbook, but a story written in hunger, cold, and the quiet endurance of millions who refused to give up. And yet, in the darkest decade America ever faced, something remarkable. Out of the despair came a new kind of strength, the kind that only exists when there's nothing left to lose. Neighbors who once barely spoke began sharing what little they had. One family might cook extra stew so another wouldn't go hungry. Churches opened their doors to the homeless. Musicians played on street corners to lift spirits. In a world that had lost its wealth, human connection became the only real currency. Families turned their yards into gardens, growing tomatoes, beans, and potatoes to feed themselves and their neighbors. Kids learned to patch up old clothes instead of buying new ones. Mothers became master inventors, turning stale bread into pudding or mending broken toys with scraps of cloth. It was a time of hardship, yes, but also of creativity and resilience unlike any other. Radio became the heartbeat of the nation. Every evening, people would gather around it, not just for news, but for escape. President Roosevelt's fireside chats gave comfort to millions, his calm voice reassuring a frightened nation. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. For the first time, a leader spoke directly to the people, not as numbers or workers, but as human beings struggling together. Art and music also transformed. The sorrow of the streets turned into soulful blues, and paintings began reflecting the grit of real life. It was no longer about glamour. It was about truth. Still, the pain lingered. But there was something unbreakable in the human spirit, a belief that tomorrow had to be better than today. Government programs like the New Deal gave people hope again. Jobs were created to rebuild roads, bridges, and parks. Men who hadn't worked in years were suddenly building America's backbone, and with every paycheck, dignity began to return. Women entered the workforce in record numbers, taking jobs in offices, schools, and factories. Society was changing forever. But even as the economy began to heal, people never forgot what the Depression taught them: to save, not spend; to value community over comfort; to live simply because tomorrow isn't promised. It created a generation of cautious, hard-working people, ones who understood that real wealth isn't money, but stability. When World War II arrived, those same survivors carried that resilience with them. They knew what it meant to struggle, to sacrifice, to rebuild from nothing. The Great Depression forged the backbone of what would become America's greatest generation. Looking back, it's easy to pity those who lived through it. But maybe we should admire them. Because while they had less than we can imagine, they also had something we've almost lost today: gratitude. Gratitude for the smallest things: a meal, a neighbor's kindness, a sunrise. And maybe that's the biggest lesson the Great Depression left behind. When the world takes everything from you, your job, your money, your pride, the only thing left to hold on to is each other. So next time the news screams recession or crash, remember, people have survived worse. And they didn't just survive. They endured, adapted, and rebuilt the world we live in today. This is Blood and Fortune, where history doesn't just repeat, it speaks. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe and share it, because history deserves to be felt, not forgotten.